described by her family as a free spirit with a heart of gold. And her father, Kari, was a retired firefighter who absolutely loved being a dad. And from everything I read, if he could have had it his way, he would have spent all of his time with his two children, Jessie and Brandon. Kari describes Jessie as so beautiful inside and out, and honestly just a special person. Jessie and her brother Brandon were like two little peas in a pod. They always had each other's backs, and Brandon said that Jessie worried about him just like a parent would. And Jessie worried about her dad the same way. In fact, she never wanted to let him out of her sight. When she was 14, Kari and Jessie's mother Carla divorced, and Jessie spent her high school years with her dad and his new wife, Gina. But this young lady had a passion for life, and she also had a little bit of an adventurous streak. She was pretty independent, and Kari thinks that that might have led her to the situation I'm about to tell you about. When Jessie went off to college, her dad missed her terribly, and Jessie seemed to be focused more on having fun than focusing on school, and her dad got really worried. But Jessie did everything she could to put Kari's mind at ease. She would call him before she went to bed, and she would text him, and she would be like, "Dad, I'm okay, everything's fine, I'm okay." And after a few years of college, Jessie decides that she's going to move to Orange Beach, and she starts working tables at a popular beachside restaurant called Cobalt. But she still spoke to her dad every day. She had been living with a long-term boyfriend. I could not find out how long-term it was, but she surprised everyone when she fell for a different guy. A guy named Jason Lowe. He was described as friendly, outgoing, handsome, ambitious. The guy had 2 college degrees, so he was quite the catch. But for Jessie, Jason wasn't just a new love interest. He was a ticket to a bigger, more exciting life. So when Jason moved to Dallas for a 6-figure job in the technological industry, Jessie decided she was going to join him and pursue her own dream of cosmetology. She saw this move to Dallas as another adventure, and it was kind of strange because she failed to mention her move to Dallas when she saw her family that Christmas. Shortly after the holidays, Jessie prepared to leave for Texas. Now, her family found it really strange because this girl who always had her iPhone with her suddenly started to never, ever answer it or respond. Her friends couldn't reach her, and people started to get concerned when suddenly her phone was just shut off. Now, the only way to contact Jessie was through Jason. Her friends would find out that Jason was monitoring all of Jessie's calls, and eventually it got to the point that every time Kari called Jessie, he only got to speak to Jason, who told Kari that Jessie would call him later. But Kari went to visit Jessie, and she was like hugging him more than usual, and he tried to get her alone to ask her if she was okay, if she needed help. And she said, yeah, I'm still moving to Dallas with Jason, everything's fine. But Kari really knew something was wrong, and even though Jessie just never let on that anything was wrong, Kari had this bad feeling. 4 months after that, Jessie moves to Dallas and stops answering her dad's phone calls altogether. And, Kari pays a visit to them, and Jessie just says that she's really happy Gary's like, no, Jess, something is seriously wrong with this guy. You're coming home with me. You're not staying here. And she said, Daddy, there's nothing you can do or say to make me go home with you. I'm staying with Jason. Gary believes that Jason had some kind of mind control over his daughter, and that it continued further and further with every attempt that Gary made to reach out to his daughter, Jessie. Gary would be angry and he would say, let me speak to her. Why are you answering the phone? And Jason would say, oh, she's really upset. She misses you and she's just really upset and she can't talk right now. Gary's not buying any of this for even 1 second, and his father's intuition is just keeping him up at night. So he persists like a good dad would. He calls Jason and he insists on speaking to Jessie. Jason gets really defensive and he says, I don't know. He starts yelling, they're not codependent. He doesn't know where Jessie is. And Gary kind of lets it slide and he's thinking, I've got to do something. And then Mother's Day comes and goes, and Jessie does not call her mom, and she does not call her stepmom. And Gary decides, that's it, I'm going to Texas. He gets in his truck and he drives to Texas and he is just mad. In fact, he's so angry that it scared him. He texted Jason on the way there and he says, if Jessie is not at the apartment when I get there, you will be in a tremendous world of trouble. But when Gary gets to the apartment, after an 11-hour drive, Jessie was nowhere to be found. Gary said, Jason, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to my daughter. Where is she? And Jason would just say, I don't know where she is. So when Jason could not produce Jessie, Gary immediately goes to the Richardson Police Department and files a missing persons report. Over the next 24 hours, police go on the hunt for Jessie Bardwell. They go straight to Jason's house and they have their audio recorders rolling, and Jason tells the cops the same thing he tells Jessie's dad. I don't know where she is. It just seems like she disappeared. I'm gonna sit here and wait and think that every sound is her, like, coming back or something. I don't know. It's surreal, almost, Jason says on the audio recording. He goes on to tell the police that the last time he saw Jessie, she was driving away in her Acura on Mother's Day. And they find that kind of strange because when they do a little research, they find out that Jessie doesn't own that car anymore. They find out that the couple had sold the Acura 3 weeks before Jason claimed Jessie drove off in it. In fact, they found the car in the new owner's driveway. Gary is just getting to be at his wit's end, and he just goes over to Jason's house and he is, furious because he can't find his daughter, and he tells his wife to take his gun and hide it. So he goes to their apartment and he knocks on the door and Jason won't answer. Gary said he could hear footsteps, but that Jason would not come to the door. So Gary went right back down, called the Richardson Police Department and said, I know you told us not to try and come see Jason, but would you please send a unit over here? Because I want you to know I'm not trying to start any trouble. And they did. And they got there pretty quickly. Police return to the apartment complex and they find something a little strange. Jason's Audi SUV is covered in mud and damaged. An officer speaks with him and he's also covered in mud. And the officer noted that while Jason did have his dog with him, the dog was clean. The affidavit says that Jason told she frequently walked. Jason said that he got muddy when he had to chase after the dog after it got away from him. This document also said that the officer noticed fresh cuts on Jason's hands, which he claimed he got when the dog scratched him. Jason said the damage to his SUV happened when he took it mudding, and that was about 2 weeks earlier. Officials said that Jason officially told them that he had last seen Jessie at 8 a.m. on May 8th, and it wasn't unusual for her to disappear for hours at a time because they led a sort of lifestyle where they could both do their own things without being codependent. Okay. Later on May 12th, investigators once again interviewed Jason at his apartment. The affidavit said that they found like a saucer on the kitchen counter, and Jason admitted to them that the white powdery substance inside of it was cocaine. When investigators questioned him about the sale of Jessie's Acura, he told them that he'd set up a lease agreement with the witness, and the man was allowed to pick up the vehicle at any time. But remember, he told the police that she left in this car on May 8th. When detectives asked Jason if he would sign for consent to search the house, he reportedly agreed to let investigators search the apartment, but said they couldn't search the garage because it was a common area, and that several people could have access to it. They persisted, and eventually he agreed to show them around the garage, and that's when they smelled human decomposition, and they noticed blood pooled around the back of the Audi SUV. Detectives returned the next day, which I thought was so weird, with a search warrant, and they uncovered more evidence. Crime scene technicians used luminol, which eliminated bloodstains in the entire rear compartment of the SUV and along the driver's side of the vehicle. It apparently illuminated very brightly, and the truck was still dripping from the undercarriage with blood. It tested positive for blood, so it was definitely blood. And it was just all over the car. It was on the floor of the rear compartment, on a storage compartment, on the gear shift, on the steering wheel, on the driver's side door handle. Investigators also spotted a bottle of cleaning solution on a dresser near the rear passenger door. A shovel leaned against one of the walls, and a pair of muddy boots in the back of the car. They also discovered a bullet hole on the rear west wall of the garage. After speaking with several witnesses in the neighborhood, the document says that one witness reported seeing Jason cleaning the bed of the truck on the night of May 7th and removing several trash bags from a box. Cops decide to bust Jason on the drugs they found in his apartment, but it's Jessie they want to talk about in his investigation. Yeah, I didn't do anything, he says. Okay, the police say, but did you wonder where she went? Jason says, "I'm not going to be accused of something, man. This is it. This is it for me. I'm done talking." The police said they knew Jason was responsible. They knew that he had taken Jessie somewhere, but they just wanted to know where, and he wasn't talking. And without Jessie's body, they don't have a case. So, somehow, even without a body, Jason is charged with her murder. Detectives suspect that he killed her, but Texas is a huge state with rivers and ponds and a million different places you could hide someone. As prosecutors dig into Jason Lowe's history, though, they find some pretty nasty stuff. They hear the 911 call of Jason's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Christine Chambers. She says that her relationship with Jason was the stuff of nightmares, intimidation, and violence. He choked her one night. He looked her straight in the eye and said he was killing her. He just started pushing her and shoving her, and in fact had her down on the floor with all of his weight on top of her. And she blacked out, but somehow woke up and was able to call 911. She says, "He tried to kill me. He had me on the ground until I was unconscious." And the police asked her how strong of a grip he had around her neck, 1 through 10, and she said 11. This is not a joke. This is not someone's boyfriend beat the crap out of his girlfriend. That's not it. He tried to kill me. Christine dropped the charges against Jason, but she still lived in fear that if he ever found out that she was going to go through with it, he would have gotten out and would have come back to get her, and that he would kill her this time. So now, detectives start to wonder, did Jason Lowe snap and kill Jessie Bardwell? But he's not talking. But he, of course, starts to formulate a story. He is a great big dummy, and he doesn't realize he's being recorded when he talks to people on the phone in jail. And he's talking to his buddy Tommy, and Jason and Jessie were house sitting for Tommy the weekend that Jessie went missing. And it's at their house that Jason claims something terrible happened. He tells Tommy that Jessie's death was a terrible accident, that they were having sex in the shower when she slipped and hit her head. And then he says they went to bed that night, but Jessie never woke up in the morning. Jason says, "I messed up. I made a mistake, like it was an accident, you know? And that's what I'm gonna share. Like, I know what I'm guilty of, and it's like literally split second. Like, that's what I did, and you know, I'm sorry, but I can't. There's nothing I could have done differently, and nothing's gonna change that. I'm pretty confident." No, dude, you're not. Now, Jason may think that an accident is a pretty solid defense, but this admission gave them everything they needed, except one thing. Where is Jessie Bardwell's body? He placed himself with Jessie at the time of her death, and he offers to cut a deal when he realizes that with this recording and his history of violence, he could face life in prison. So he says, "I'll lead them to the body if they take life off the table." So basically they would limit his sentence to 50 years in prison. They agree, and Jason Lowe leads prosecutors to a muddy field about 35 miles away in Farmersville, Texas. He says it's about 250 yards down that fence line, referring to Jessie Bardwell as it, which made me want to punch him in his smug little face. At the edge of strong case against Jason. He had this sadistic past of choking his girlfriend, and numerous ex-girlfriends, in fact, testified that he could have killed them, too. At Jason's trial, it gets even worse for Jessie's parents. They learn the horrible details of Jessie's final days and what her cold-hearted boyfriend was doing in the hours after her death. He was trying to hook up with other girls. He was sending explicit photos of himself, and women were sending explicit photos back. All of this was happening while Jessie's body was still in the back of Jason's Audi. Prosecutor Wes Wynn said, "I don't know how Kari was able to restrain himself from jumping over that bar and not coming after Jason Lowe himself." Jessie's father learned that he was only just a few feet away from her body when he went to Jason Lowe's apartment for the first time. She was still in the back of the car. Kari said, "He threw my daughter away like a piece of trash. She was in the car, in the garage, dead while I was knocking on the door." Jason once again says it was an accident, and he in fact acted out the scenario of her falling in front of the jury. I saw a picture of him like on the floor of the courtroom, and I was like, "You idiot, what are you doing? Like, get up." Jason Lowe was convicted of murder, finally. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and he will be eligible for parole in May of 2041 when he is 52 years old. Which, if you ask me, is not a sentence at all. I don't think that this creep should get out ever. I do not think that she took a drug and slipped and fell and went to sleep and he thought it was an accident. No, I straight up think this guy killed her. You cannot tell me. Oh, if she fell and hit her head, okay, yes, head wounds bleed a lot, but whatever. Then there would have been some kind of trauma to her skull, right? They would have seen that in the autopsy, despite how decomposed she was. There would have been some kind of bash to her head, I think. I'm pretty sure. It's so strange to me that they were unable to tell any point of injury with all of that blood full of the back of the car, in the car, on the steering wheel, on the door handles. Yeah, she didn't slip and hit her head, and he didn't throw her in the trunk. I think, then the blood would have been all over the bed and the bed sheet, not necessarily all over the car. Regardless, dude's a creep and doesn't deserve to get out of jail. I'm incredibly sad for her dad. I always wanted to be a daddy's girl. It was just something I never got to be. I'm definitely a mama's girl, but I always wanted that connection with my dad. My sister had it. I always just felt like there was not enough room for me. Anyway. And, Kari just knew something was wrong. He just knew something was wrong. But I've been in that situation. Truthfully, we've discussed this recently, where they cut you off from contact from your family. They isolate you. They get you to move with them. I was smart enough